والله انا اشتري لك اللي بدك اياه. اكلت الشيبس اللي شريت لك اياه؟ امان. طب رد علي، وشوشني. كش تتكلم؟ طب وشوشني. خلاص كش ترد علي. طب انا زعلتك في شيء؟ انا زعلتك يا عبود؟ رد علي مالك. امان رد علي. طب رد علي بس كلمة واحدة بس. بحياة الله بس كلمة واحدة. طب وشوشني نتفاهم. طب هاي شكل والله، هاي وجبت لك اياه معي. مش قلت لي اشتري لي وتعال؟ شريت لك والله. جبت لك شيبس وحياة الله ما تسيبني. والله ما احنا قادرين، تعبنا خلص. وحياة النبي تعبنا، ارحمونا. طيب يا عبود، مش قلت لي بدك تشتري لي؟ والله شريت لك شيبس وحلويات. طب رد علي بحياة ربك، بحياة ربك رد علي.
Status quo.
So maybe even let me add something. Okay, if you want to do something together and you're not so sure what is it that you need to do, this is our suggestion. Okay, we talked before about picking sides and the side of the people, right? We need Americans to demand their political leaders. I know it sounds ridiculous with Trump in the White House, also to me, but you know what? It's still important to demand the American administration or politicians to pick a fight with the Israeli government right now.
Are you an instrument of the Israeli government and Mossad?
No.
Okay. Speak more about
that. No, I mean...
I think I'm just going for... we're going to hit on some things that are just like the worst critic of either this conversation or the worst critic of standing together or the worst critic of the effort to see across the aisle and seek peace more broadly would say.
I'm ashamed to say, and I'm angry to say, but in my society, and I have to admit it, the amount of dehumanization in my society is sky high, and we are fighting to rehumanize people.
Is life like for being Palestinian-Christian? What do you get impacted by, and is it that different than what a Muslim Palestinian gets impacted by?
Safe there, but they don't get to reach the places where Palestinian Christians are being spit on, are being under occupation. Beit Jala, Bethlehem, I spend most of my days there. Christians don't reach that area, but all of the holy places and practices are there, and you can talk to actually Palestinian Christians and learn from them about settler violence, for example, to be the only thing that Israelis are listening to, and it became common sense, even if they don't believe it inside. Like, all Palestinians want to kill all Jews. All Palestinians are animals. We have no partner. There is no one to talk to on the other side. So when you keep saying those stuff, when your people, like when the community hears nothing but those stuff, you will start believing them. An Israeli citizen, I'm really exposed to Palestinian media, really exposed to the Israeli media, and I see the way they say it. Like in the Israeli media, it's less, okay, 300 terrorists were killed. But it's not 300 terrorists. Like, I have my social media, I can see the innocent people and children being burned and being killed.
So it's everyone, every 300, regardless of if they're civilians, they're all terrorists.
So this is what the Israeli community gets.
Because that word,
terrorists.
That's my point, that word just automatically almost just gives everything a pass.
Yeah, it's like, it's legit. And we don't need to feel, we don't need to empathize, we don't need to know what's going on in Gaza, because terrorists are being killed. There are no innocent people in Gaza.
And who cares about terrorists?
Yeah, who cares
about them? The word is so dangerous.
It's very dangerous. I agree.
Yeah, that the Palestinians don't want life. They don't like life. I've heard this in the American media. It's a death. They're a death cult. They glorify death.
That Palestinians really do church death more than life, and that's another dehumanization of us. Like, okay, they want to die. Mahmoud Darwish said, على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. On this land is something worth living for. And there's also a very famous poem saying that we teach life, sir.
we are recording. We're off and running. So welcome. You are going to have to help me a little bit occasionally if I mess up your name. I don't know why. For some reason, it's like hard for me to just, I'm terrible with names. It takes me a while.
Usually when I order coffee in Starbucks, I tell them my name is Isaac. It's much easier for them. So no worries about it.
Okay. And I guess to start off, I just want to welcome Itamar Avneri. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I pronounced it okay. And Angela Mattar. Is that correct? Awesome. Ahlan wa sahlan fiki. These are representatives of Standing Together. It's the largest Arab Jewish grassroots movement in Israel, if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry to interrupt, but Palestinian-Jewish.
What did I say?
Arab Jewish.
Sorry, Palestinian-Jewish.
With that shirt on I
apologize.
know it's Palestinian.
That's what I get for pulling something off Wikipedia and being like crunching at the very start to this interview, in the lead up to the interview. Largest Palestinian-Jewish grassroots movement in Israel, and is dedicated to building a society that chooses peace, justice, and independence for Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs. They believe in building a true partnership between Israelis and Palestinians based on shared interests, chief among them, of course, being ending the occupation. Standing Together first became active in 2015 and has about 5,300 members as of April 2024. If there's anything wrong in what I'm saying, like I said, I pulled it off the internet. Please correct me. Before we begin, I want to make sure we align our listeners on my thinking around this discussion. Number one, my goal with this podcast is to talk to everyone, explore ideas from all angles, and leave nothing off of the table. Number two, people may disagree with some of what we are talking about, what we say, the opinions that are shared on this podcast, and they may have strong feelings around these topics, obviously, as we all undoubtedly do. However, we can only move forward by discussing and trying to find any signs of light possible in an otherwise quite dark place at times, especially now with what's going on in Gaza, where we're just passing, the official number reported is 52,000 dead. However, it's likely to be much higher than that once all the rubble can be sifted through and people can confirm body counts. Number three, our goal is to explore the topic or possibility today of peace, justice, and resolution of the conflict in the Holy Land. I will present many questions with the intent of exploring the hardest positions that are a roadblock to peace. The goal is to understand and inform, not to diminish anyone. And number four, lastly, to my critics or anyone skeptical of me, I am not paid for, funded, influenced by anyone other than myself and my desire to explore topics, learn, and hopefully have an audience that does so with me as well. My simple position is, don't people of all faiths want a Holy Land that is worthy of the core tenets of their faith? How can we collectively accept the painting of the Holy Land with blood and injustice, while at the same time holding our core beliefs to be the essence of goodness? We must unite around fighting against those with bad intentions in their hearts, those who never want peace or a resolution to the conflict. And so what I'd like to do, something that caught my eye, Angela, when I looked at your Instagram, which I'm new to Instagram. I'm like an old millennial, I guess, so practically a Gen Xer in some people's minds. I'm sure young people will be like, he's a boomer. But my goal was to go on your Instagram, just get to know a little bit about you. And you had a Bible verse, I believe, in your Instagram. And it was, "Blessed are the peacemakers." It's a very famous Bible verse that I thought was really beautiful. It really resonated with me. And it also, I wanted to highlight that there is a Quran verse that people can relate to as well, which is a famous verse that most Muslims know, which is, وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, right? This essentially, in a nutshell, for those who are non-Arabic speakers, is, and if those, with the assumption is that there's some conflict occurring or some issue, those with whom you have a conflict, kind of bend their wing or lean towards peace, then bend your wing and lean towards it as well, and have faith in God. I think those are two really key themes that we can start off with and unite this conversation around, hopefully. And very last, housekeeping. Please, 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 for those listening, if you enjoy this type of content, if you want to see more discussions like this or of this perspective or quality, please subscribe to the channel and like the videos and share this as broadly as possible on all your social media. So introductions, I leave this to you, both, please, if you don't mind. And we got to remember to share the mic. We are sharing one mic, folks, for those watching or listening. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and how you got involved. Yeah, a little bit.
You
whatever
want the
you feel is
extended
sufficient.
version or the short version?
It's up to you. I leave it to you.
You can do the edits later, but I believe
Sure.
that my personal story can help people here also understand what does it mean to be a Palestinian with an Israeli citizenship and what we do in standing together as Jews and Palestinians working together against the occupation for peace, for equality, and justice.
Sure.
So, Omar, my name is Angela Mattar. I'm a medical student. I'm in the national leadership of Standing Together alongside with Itamar here. And I wasn't born an activist. Palestinians in Israel are afraid to speak up or involve in politics because we've been told our entire lives that it is dangerous. So keep your head down, lower your voice, don't engage. That's the safest way to survive. For a long time, I really believed that, and I was born and raised in a very apolitical family. But unfortunately, for my parents, luckily for me, I was never that good Palestinian girl who doesn't ask questions, who says yes to everything. So I started doubting and asking questions like, why don't I learn about the Nakba in my curriculum, in my school? And why my villages and Palestinian villages inside Israel are poor and lack resources when the Jewish settlements are expanding on the expense of my own people? Like why me, a Palestinian in Israel, was convinced by some bigger power, I don't know who, that I am so different from Palestinians in Gaza or Palestinians in the West Bank or Palestinians in diaspora here in Chicago, for example, from Little Palestine. And I always like searched and seeked answers, and they said like we share the same exact story of disposition. If I speak to you or my grandparents or anybody from Gaza or the West Bank, we will have stories of disposition from a Nakba. And we live under the same system of control that the minute I saw that, I couldn't unsee it anymore. So my activism started not to resist the system that was trying to erase my identity, but to preserve and maintain that identity. Like wearing my kufiyi, explaining the patterns to people, about the fishnets, about the olive branches, about the rounds, like the exchange cultural rounds. And I wrote a lot of poetry. I'm a poet also, by the way. I have a self-published poetry book. And that was my activism. Years later, in 2021, I was introduced to Standing Together, Jews and Palestinians were in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem, fighting together against the eviction that was happening back then, if you remember.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah. And I looked at it and I was like, this is co-resistance. This is resistance. Like all my life I was seeking for what is resistance to me, and I saw them and I knew that this is what resistance is. It was never Jews versus Palestinians. It was those who want to humanize everybody and those who don't. Those who believe in justice, end of occupation, and peace, and those who don't. So I wanted to join them, but we had struggles across communities, but I had my own struggles inside my own community. Everybody was looking at this as normalization, you know the word. That normalization, betrayal, if you work alongside with Jews, then you're normalizing. Back then, I didn't believe that, to be honest, but I didn't join them because I was afraid and I wasn't ready to step up and face my own community. I wanted a place where I can embrace both my humanity and both my Palestinian identity and not to have to compromise any of them. And Standing Together was the place for that, but it wasn't the time for me. So fast forward a few years, October 7th happened. And October 7th happened before I got to process what was going on. Even my friends that I was with in October 6th, who studied with me, I was back then a biomedical engineering student. I wasn't yet a medical student. They asked me to prove my humanity because they know how much pride I take in my Palestinian identity. And they thought, oh, if you identify as Palestinian, then you must be someone who also identify with Hamas and with everything that they've done. So before I got the chance to process October 7th or my friends asking me to prove my humanity, I had another fight immediately. The political persecution started. Palestinians were kicked and expelled from their jobs and their colleges just for liking a post or for sharing a verse from the Quran that nobody in the Jewish community really understood the meaning of it. Even I, as a Christian, I don't always understand the language of the Quran, and I have to look it up and interpret it in a very deep way. They called it terror sympathizing. And I knew I had to do something. So I started deleting those comments because I was, like, I had the power to do so at that time. I started trying to protect those students in my college, at least. That was the least I could do. And because I was protecting those so-called terror sympathizers, I became a terror sympathizer. I got a lot of death threats in my DMs. People were like seeing me on campus and they looked me in a weird way, and I knew they were saying, that's a terror sympathizer, Angela. And it took me a long time to not feel alone and feel like maybe there is an ally. And then Standing Together showed up to my life. Maybe they have spies, like they know who can call. Yeah,
We do.
I believe you do. I don't know how they found me. And they said, do you want to help build a student chapter inside the Technion? I was studying the Technion Haifa back then. I said yes. That was the fastest yes I said. We were kicked out of every room, Jews and Palestinians just trying to have a normal dialogue and conversation. We held... The most powerful thing we did back then, I believe, we held pictures of the hostages inside of the campus. It was illegal to protest. So we also held at the same day the pictures. It wasn't pictures. We were too afraid to do so. Drawings of dead children from Gaza outside the campus. And inside, we were considered human beings. Outside, we were considered terrorists. And that was the time that I went viral as a terror sympathizer this time, and I had to disconnect from social media for a long time. And luckily for my parents, I got accepted into med school. And my med school was in Jerusalem, so I had to move to Jerusalem. So my parents were like, okay, now Standing Together is behind you, no more activism, no more politics, but you know Jerusalem. Like, if you can hear about the occupation in Haifa, in Jerusalem, it's on full display, H.D. 2 weeks after I got to Jerusalem, I was kicked out of the Knesset in the parliament, and I went viral again.
אני והוא דיברנו היום, סבבה? לא, רגע, לא! תרחיקו אותי, לא אכפת לי, תרחיקו אותי!
תודה רבה, יוצאים כיכר לך תומכת, ויאללה לאסטרדה במטור. להוציא אותה החוצה, למה שוי גליק יכול לקרוא לאזרחים תומכת טרור? כדעתו חצה ממנו. להוציא אותה החוצה. אליאנה נסע במטור. אנחנו מתחתנים ואנחנו ערבים. אנחנו למה היא מדברת? בגלל הפדיחה הזאת היא מדברת. לא כרציבה שתדבר.
And a huge part of my activism afterwards came from this period that I knew I can't have everything, so I had to cut contact with my family because it was really pressuring on me. And then I got introduced to the West Bank. It was 15 minutes away from my home, and there was a land theft. The Kasia family lost their houses. Like, they came to their land and they found all of their stuff outside. So we did a nonviolent resistance camp for 30 days. We ate there, we slept there, we did everything there. And on the 30th day, the settler came with his dog and he released it at me. And I was bitten in my leg. And it took me, like, I was hospitalized first in Beit Jala in Bethlehem, and they didn't have any vaccinations to give me. They didn't know how to take care of me. They really do lack a lot of resources. And they were so afraid because I have an Israeli citizenship. So whatever happens to me, like, they'll be in a real
there might be
trouble.
blowback that could,
Yeah. So they sent me immediately to Jerusalem, back to the hospital. And I was, like, in bed asking myself, like, is it worth it? I cut contact with my family. I have no home, no money, nothing. And the answer is yes. Like, I don't want to just fight for justice. I don't want to just like know that I want justice. I want to fight for it, and I want to do it alongside with people like Itamar, who like believe in the same things I do and know that nobody is going anywhere, and my people need to be liberated as soon as possible. So this is my story. This is how I got into activism. That was the first time I was really dedicated to the movement, and now this is the only political home. And standing together, by the way, is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's not Israel. It's standing together. So thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I have so many follow-up questions to your introduction alone, but I want Itamar to go ahead and introduce himself and move the mic over, and then I'll do some follow-up questions.
Thank you. So, hi.
Hi.
Thank you for having us. It's exciting. It's important. We're very happy for the opportunity to share our story and views and what is that we do with a broader audience. So thank you for the opportunity. My name is Itamar. I now live in Tel Aviv. I'm also serving as a city council member in Tel Aviv-Jaffa. And like Angela, I'm part of the national leadership of Standing Together. I grew up in a small kibbutz. Do you know what a kibbutz is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe just explain briefly for listeners.
Small villages in Israel with socialistic view. The community share a lot of the property. Not so much today, but that's the basic idea. So, for example, we didn't have a car. There were cars that belonged to the community, and you can take a car, etc. So I grew up in a small kibbutz just outside of Nazareth. And unlike Angela, I'm a good boy. Sometimes in the States, they refer to it as a nice Jewish boy. Yeah, sure. I mean, I loved politics, always. I loved reading about politics. I had many opinions about politics, but I never thought about myself as an activist, as someone who was actually going to engage in politics. But I think two very important women in my life pushed me to this kind of work, to this path of activism. The first is my mother. I'm coming from a mixed descent. My father is an Ashkenazi Jew. His parents came from Hungary. And my mother is from Tunisia. Her parents came from Tunisia. So Mizrahi Jewish family, Arab Jewish family, you may say, very traditional, kind of religious. And it was, I think, the age of 15, maybe 14, maybe 16, we went for Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new year, to my grandparents, the parents of my mother, and we were all sitting around the table, and my grandfather refused to start with the blessings because his older son, my mother's older brother, was late. And in our community, in Mizrahi Jewish families, the older son is an important figure in the family. Mm-hmm. So we were waiting for him. And while we were waiting, my mother and her mother, my grandmother, went to the kitchen to check with the food. And then my uncle arrived. And my grandfather immediately started with the blessings. 15 seconds later, I think, my mother is bursting out of the kitchen, tears in her eyes, and she's shouting at her father, my grandfather. And they were very, very close, very, very similar to one another, and loved each other to death. And she was shouting at him, "How dare you? How dare you not waiting for me and mother? How dare you make us all wait for my brother, but then not waiting for us? We deserve to hear the blessings as well." And she was so offended that the next thing she did was to call my father, my sisters, and me, and she told us, "Get up, we're going, we're leaving, we're not staying tonight." and you know, now we're joking a little bit and we're laughing, but it was hard at the time. And I still am when I'm telling that. And also back then, I felt so embarrassed and a bit ashamed because I was sitting there and I was about to eat. I didn't think about that. No, I don't want you to worry. My mother won. My uncle was never late again. Everything is fine. But my mother taught me something on that day. She taught me that politics is not only about politicians and elections and policies. It's extremely important, don't get me wrong. But politics is much more about the day-to-day inequalities, the day-to-day injustice that you have to identify in your society. And then politics is not only about casting your vote in elections, it's about using your voice in order to change the injustices in your society. So from that day on, I think I promised to myself that one day I'm going to make my mother proud. I'm going to do something like she did that night. A few years later, I think it was 2007, I moved to live in kibbutz Be'eri, in the Gaza envelope. So I moved to Be'eri, it's in the Gaza envelope, and it was just the beginning of the era that Hamas shot rockets from Gaza to the Gaza envelope. Now, I'm saying rockets or missiles sometimes, but one should know that was basically pipes. I mean, of course it was scary. Of course it was dangerous if it hits you, but those were not rockets, not real rockets. But I was afraid. It was the first time.
Sure.
We had no shelters back then in the area. And I asked my boss, what should I do if there's an alarm? And she told me, oh, it's very easy. You just count to 20 whenever there's an alarm. And I asked her, and then what? What should I do? And she told me, that's it. If you got to 20, it already fell somewhere else. That's how Be'eri and Gaza are close. It's very, very close. It's a kilometer, maybe even less.
Okay.
But, and again, I'm a bit of ashamed to say that I was afraid, and I did it. I counted to 20 each and every time there was an alarm. But what really kept me up at night weren't the alarms about missiles or rockets coming from Gaza to the Gaza envelope. It was bombings in Gaza by the Israeli military, because even when there's no war on Gaza, sometimes the Israeli military is bombing Gaza, and those explosions, they were powerful. I mean, we heard them, and it was scary. And I used to lay awake in my bed and thinking, what's going on? That's scary. Now, on Saturday nights, the dining room in the kibbutz, it was closed. So I ate dinner at my friend's house. I had two very good friends. They were brothers, and they lived in Be'eri. That's why I moved there. And their mother was Vivian Silver. Vivian, she was a very well-known figure in the Israeli peace camp from Canadian descent. She worked with a lot of people in Gaza, and she was murdered on October 7. And we used to talk about all those things. And from her, I learned that it's okay to feel scared. But if I'm feeling scared, I have to think about the people behind the wall, behind the fence, and how scared they probably feel. And that it's okay to want to be safe. But if I want to be safe, I have to guarantee also the safety of the people behind the fence. Because we are connected, and my safety depends on their safety, and vice versa. Their safety depends on my safety. And I also learned from her that if I want to fight for peace and justice, I can't do it only with Jewish partners. That would be ridiculous. The land is shared, and peace is a work. Peace is a process. We have to build it together. And so you have to engage, or I learned that I have to engage in a joint struggle of Palestinians and Jewish people. So that was the lane that I started to seek. And then in 2015, we founded the movement Standing Together because all of a sudden there was a dire need for a struggle. In late 2015, the third intifada broke out. It was called in the Israeli media, at least, the intifada of the knives or the intifada of the loneliness. Extremely frightening time for Palestinians and for Jewish people. There were stabbings on the streets. There were lynches on the street. An asylum seeker from Eritrea or from South Sudan, I'm sorry, I can't remember. His name was Habtum Zarhum. He was lynched to death in Beersheba in southern Israel because people thought that he's a terrorist, so they lynched him to death. Extremely scary. There were civilians arrested. People just stopped Palestinians on the street and decided that they are terrorists. And then in the midst of all that, Benjamin Netanyahu, our prime minister, went out to the media and said, with his baritone voice and usual smugness, I am being asked whether we will always live by the sword. And he paused for a second. And then he said, the answer is yes. Now, really, of course, I don't like Benjamin Netanyahu. One could guess that. But at least back then, I still expected the elected leader of my country to have some sort of vision, some notion of hope, but there was none, just a promise for a perpetual war, which we see unfolding right now in Gaza, in the West Bank, and all around the Middle East. And what was even worse was that almost no one in the political sphere tried to challenge him about that. Almost no one tried to say, like my mother back then, how dare you? How dare you say something like that? So we've decided, a bunch of activists that we already knew each other, some of us were Palestinians, some of us Jews, all citizens of Israel, that if no one is going to give us hope from above, we're going to build it from below. And we declared an anti-occupation peace demonstration in the middle of the Intifada in Jerusalem. It was October 17, 2015. And we thought that if we're going to be lucky and work really hard, 500 people would come. 3,000 people came. And then we had another one in Haifa and in the Triangle area and in many other cities and areas across the country. And people just kept on coming. And we've decided that this time around, we don't want just to move from one demonstration to another. We want to stay together, really stay together. So we've decided to form some sort of a movement where we can all work together and articulate a shared vision and lead together this struggle. And this movement came to be, standing together, Nakef Ma'an in Arabic, Omdim Biyachad in Hebrew. Today, standing together is the biggest grassroots movement in Israel. And as you said before, our goal is to build the new majority inside our society that would have the power to demand and achieve what we all deserve, which is equality, real equality between all of us, social and environmental justice, and of course, a just peace. And when we're talking about a just peace right now, during this horrible war of annihilation on Gaza, one must say that we are talking about a ceasefire agreement and a hostage deal immediately, right now, and then lifting the blockade over Gaza, ending the occupation, and reach to agreement that would guarantee the independence and the sovereignty and the freedom and the justice and the safety and the prosperity of everybody on the land. And this is what Standing Together is trying to do.
And is Standing Together, just a simple follow-up, and then I want to touch on a few things that Angela and you mentioned about your past in terms of activism. Is it accurate to say that the goal is to take that to a one-state solution, or is that going too far? It doesn't matter the form. We're not so much concerned about the political form. We're more concerned about the overall essence and spirit of whatever that ends up being.
You said it beautifully and perfectly. We're not lacking formulas. There are many, many formulas. Two-state solution, one-state solution, federation, confederation. Angela knows as well. Each and every week, at least, we get one email from someone abroad saying, hey, Standing Together, here's my peace plan. I figured it out for you. And say, okay, thank you very much, but delete. And we delete it, not because it's not important, but because the real problem is the political will. We need a political will. You mentioned this verse from the Quran, right? I believe that my society, the Jewish Israeli society, should be the one that extend its hand for peace first, because we are the hegemony on the land, on the ground.
Yeah.
We have the power. We are, I'm sorry, maybe some Israelis won't like it, but we are the oppressors, right? Sure. So we should be the first. And this is what we are trying to do. And if we'll be able to achieve peace and agreement that would guarantee all the things that I've said, all the fundamentals, it doesn't really matter if the two-state solution, one-state solution,
the exact form of it isn't as important.
Angela said it beautifully in an event we had before. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. It's about the quality and the quality of life for everybody.
I wanted to ask about I just want to say to you and also to anyone listening, it's interesting, and this is just to put myself out there in terms of transparency and vulnerability a little bit, because I think I'm so excited to be able to talk to you both. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you as well, Angela, because believe it or not, you're the first Palestinian Christian I've ever actually sat down and had a conversation with. So I grew up in a college town in Iowa State University, very diverse, but we only really, the few Palestinians that went there as grad students or came over and studied were always Muslim. And I never have, I don't believe, I keep thinking like, have I ever? I don't think I've ever sat down and spoken and had a conversation with, I've probably seen them, and even in this area, there are Palestinian Christians. But as far as sit down and have a conversation with, for whatever reason, my path is just not crossed with them. And so I'm really excited. I have a lot of interesting questions to ask you about.
It's about time.
It's my pleasure. The other thing I want to touch on quickly, and maybe I can ask you and then I can ask Itamar, is activism. So right now today in America, activist and activism has gotten this really bad rap. Like if you've noticed in the media, like the right wing looks at activists as being left fringe, kooky lunatics who are just special snowflakes that just keep on blurting and blathering about whatever issue it's all young, stupid people, kind of like the idea, right? The left, I would say, like you look at the Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart characterization of the rights activists is like redneck, MAGA hat wearing, ask them a question, they have the dumbest answer. That's what they always show on like the what do you call those shows? Like fun comedy, news comedy, kind of like, shows. They show, oh, this is like the typical Trump supporter, right? So activist has been crapped on so much by both sides over the last, I'd say, since Trump won his first presidency. And I guess for me growing up, my mom was, she's not born and raised Muslim. She was Catholic and she became Muslim and converted later in life and stuff. And but she grew up like an East Coast kind of liberal, like Kennedy, John F. Kennedy loving kind of family. And she always taught us about like the beauty of like the activist culture during Vietnam and how it was a good thing. And look at people standing up for what they believe in and trying to change society and try to have an active role in something positive. My question to you is, how do you view activism in terms of, to me, when you were talking, I'm like, everything in the world for this woman, this young woman, seems to indicate that she should just stick with what's easy and stick with what her community wants her to do. That's kind of my point. And for people listening, my point is more being an activist, especially if it's against what your family and your whether it's your friend, your peer circle is about, is very difficult. It's a huge sacrifice. It's a huge, honestly, it's a threat, and it's kind of a penalty that you pay. Can you speak a little bit about like how did you balance that, and why were you still moved to continue down that path against all cognitive biases that you were already raised on that told you, just be quiet, just do your studies and don't worry about it?
Thank you for the question,
Yeah.
Omar. I need to say that it's important for me to say also to my Palestinian friends back home and many people here also, activism is a spectrum. Like, just because I do those stuff doesn't mean that this is activism, and who does less or who does more is like, it's not like that. Back home, when I look at my Palestinian friends, their activism is about like to wake up in the morning and like embrace their Palestinian identity, and that's enough. That's like activism, or doing something for their own people, even if it's a lecture or helping like children in the neighborhood to study for their exams. Everybody has a different capacity to how, what's the word in English? Like, my English is good, but I speak both Arabic and Hebrew and also English.
It's all
and
mixed
sometimes,
up.
yeah.
And traveling all around the country.
Yeah.
Being jet lagged and tired. And
Yeah. So to what extent are you really capable to sacrifice?
Yeah.
For me, growing up, I always knew that I am the one who speaks up. When I see something, I talk about it. When something needs to be done, I'm the one who does it. When someone tells me no, like my parents used to say no a lot. And sometimes it's out of fear, out of love. But for me, I needed answers. Like, why not?
Yeah.
I look doubtfully at stuff. And before October 7th, as I told you, my activism was just preserving my identity. I never resisted the system that was trying to erase it because I was afraid. Fear is a real thing.
It is, yeah.
And I was afraid both from the Jewish community and how they would look at me embracing my identity, and both from my own community and how they would look at me resisting the system alongside Jews. And after October 7th, when I saw everything falling and collapsing, like, for me, that was the moment that I gotta stick to my truth. Like, I gotta take this fear, put it down for a minute, and take up the responsibility to actually do something and make a change. And even if the fear still exists, I gotta take it and channel it and turn it into action. And a lot of times, I will be honest with you, I don't have it all figured out. I don't know always what's the right thing to do or what should I do or when, but I do it. Like, I just do it and I figured it out along the way. And what also helps me is that I'm part of a movement and partnership that when I need to take a rest, if it's for like, I don't know, just take a rest and sleep at home for a few days or study for my medical education, I have people who can do the work for me. So that's what keeps me going. Now, regarding my family and the way they always try to keep me out of this world, it was a really tough decision for me, like to cut contact, because I knew that I needed to do something. They're not letting me, but that was very important for me, to fight for justice. And we Palestinians in Israel were told that we cannot do anything, but I believe personally that we're not only part of the struggle, we must lead the struggle, and we need to build as many Palestinian leadership as possible. So I put aside my family, for like 6-7 months, I figured out things with my own. There was a lot of pieces inside of me that I needed to reconcile with, like the normalization part. I reconciled it and I stopped calling it normalization, because I'm not normalizing the occupation. I'm not normalizing the oppression. I am simply co-resisting. And I don't care who's my partner co-resisting. Whoever believes in the same things I believe in, please, welcome, join me. Let's fight together. Mm-hmm. I reconciled also with the fear that speaking up as a Palestinian might get me in a lot of trouble, and it did. I was bitten by a dog. I was kicked out of the parliament. I was beaten by cops in the demonstrations. We have like really brutality, police brutality in demonstrations in Jerusalem. But you know, like when you know, you know. Like when you know, you know. And when you have empathy, like also as a woman, like not to say anything about men, but like as a woman, like I was repressed and oppressed first as a woman. Also in my own community, also across communities. So I learned to speak up for myself, for others. I learned to embrace my humanity, embrace my empathy. Empathy is really critical and important. So I use that, I'm driven by it, and I hate politics. Full disclaimer, like I know that I'm in a political movement, I'm an activist, but I hate politics. I'm not like Itamar, but I love people. Like people is the only thing that drives me and that keeps me going with this activism journey.
Well, I think something that you said stood out to me, and you were trying to explain when you couldn't find your words, you were trying to explain that you have to go through it, but you also have to just kind of see what happens next. And to me, that verse that I recited from the Quran that says, وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Why is وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلى اللَّهِ included in there? I'm not trying to preach to anyone about religion, but or the beauty of the Quran, which I could do
love
ad
listening.
nauseum,
I love listening.
I think it's important because the whole point is if you're trying to establish peace and you're trying to reach across a table and shake someone's hand, and there's animosity and there's years and years of conflict and suffering and hatred and misery, and let's be honest, so much brutality, and both sides perceiving so much that they can go in a dark direction on, it takes وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ for a few reasons. You have to have faith in God in the sense of to trust. You have to have faith in order to trust that nothing will go wrong, that the worst elements on the other side aren't going to get the best of the other partner that you have sitting across the table from you. There's so much in there. We could go on that on a tangent all day. I want it, for the sake of time, I want to get to other topics. But yeah, it just stood out to me. It's like you couldn't find the words, but it's like you have to have faith that the thing that you feel is right, follow up on that instinct in a positive, good direction. But you might not have to have all the answers right now. And I think that's the pragmatists in the room always go, well, what about 7 chess moves down the line if we get to chess move 7 and everything gets derailed because of this party doing this? If you always do that, you'll never get moving in a better direction. So
amen to that, really. And it's also so important when we're talking about activism and community organizing that we don't have to figure it out all together at the beginning.
Sure.
You asked before about the formulas, right? 1 state, 2 state, etc. Sometimes we tell people, many of us have many opinions, but if we'll just start with that and sit in the room and starting to talk where the borders should be or should there be borders, etc., we'll never get out of the room.
Right.
And there's war raging right now, right? I mean, it's about saving lives right now.
Right.
So we don't have to have all the answers. We just have to have the courage to start, to do something. I mean, and no one knows what's going to happen. But we do know that if we'll do nothing, horrible things are going to happen, even more horrible than now. And hence, we have to just start moving. Absolutely.
Okay, no, I love that. So I want to get into some of the meat and potatoes, as we say in the Midwest, of some of these items that I had on my list.
That's new for me.
Meat and potatoes. Because, mostly German backgrounded people, a lot of people, meat and potatoes is the standard ethnic cultural food for, let's say, the meat and potatoes are the most important thing. Khubz in the Middle East, right?
The bread and butter.
Aish, yep.
Okay, we learned something today.
Welcome to the Midwest, right?
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to ask a question. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, so hopefully you understand. It's kind of meant to be a bit provocative, but to raise a point. So are you an instrument of the Israeli government and Mossad?
No.
Okay. Speak more about
that. No, I mean...
I think I'm just going for... we're going to hit on some things that are just like the worst critic of either this conversation or the worst critic of standing together, or the worst critic of the effort to see across the aisle and seek peace more broadly would say? And so some of these questions will be coming from that perspective.
No, that's totally fine, of course, to ask the question. But you know what? If you ask that question back home, I think everybody from the left and from the right, Jews and Palestinians, would say it's a ridiculous question. Not because you're ridiculous, don't get me wrong, because people see what is it we're talking about and what is it that we're actually doing. And the most radical thing is to do something, right? I mean, the Israeli government attacks us and civil society inside Israel all the time. And we are facing, Angela spoke about it, police brutality, intimidations, threats. They are trying to close civil society, not only standing together. They incite violence against people that are going to demonstrations of the left against the war and for a hostage deal and a ceasefire. So back home, no one would dare to imagine, that we are an instrument. And you know what? Sometimes think that, of course you're not an instrument by design, but are you actually normalizing some situation? But we are talking about a radical change. We are saying stuff that are quite hard for many, many, many people in Israel to hear.
On both sides.
On both sides. And we continue to do that because we believe we have to really transform the way our country works right now. And we're talking about things that the politicians don't dare to say, and that many other people do not dare to say. And I'll just give you one example. A week ago, we held a very big demonstration in Tel Aviv, 10,000 people strong. And it was about ending the war. It wasn't about Israeli democracy, which is also important, but it wasn't about that. And maybe just to open the brackets, Israel was never a full democracy. Okay, there are democratic spaces, but it was never a full democracy. But it wasn't about that. Of course, we talked about the hostages because it's extremely important, but the headline was about Gaza. And the police told us, you cannot show pictures of dead children from Gaza in your protest. You cannot do that. We do not allow it. So what we did was the day after, we bought the signs on all the bus stations in Tel Aviv, and we put the pictures with the names in Arabic and in Hebrew because we want our society to see what's going on in Gaza. And then we distributed 1,000 pictures in the demonstration. We are not going to ask the police to do that because the amount of dehumanization I'm ashamed to say and I'm angry to say, but in my society, and I have to admit it, the amount of dehumanization in my society is sky high, and we are fighting to rehumanize people. You were talking about the Quran. In Judaism, we say that all men were born in the image of God. We are trying to remind our society that everybody was created in the image of God, also the people in Gaza. So to come back to your original question, the answer is absolutely not. And just ask the Israeli government and they will show you that the answer is absolutely not.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I think from my perspective, anything around this issue could be skewed to some conspiracy theory. Everything, like any point, any position could always be some 5-dimensional, 10-dimensional chess reason why this government wants this or the Palestinians don't want that, or it can always be some kind of a conspiracy theory argument. But I want to put some of these out there because I think unless you address them head on, they just keep on festering underneath. So
go for it.
I want to ask a question for you, Angela. Or actually, maybe you can answer this as well, both. So what percentage of Israelis would you guys say would be in favor of this general sentiment, let's call it, at the very least, this sentiment of like wanting to forge a different path, wanting to find a peaceful resolution that's on justice and equality, et cetera? What percentage of Israelis, what percentage of Palestinians would you say fit into that category?
I would say we're not a majority, but there is a reason to that. And we must understand why we're not a majority. It's not because people in Palestine and Israel are not human beings with empathy and humanity, but we need to understand the Israeli community is so protected by dissociating. Like they dissociated themselves since October 7th. They don't look at Palestinian media, and the government doesn't make it any easier because they don't show the people anything from what's going on in Gaza. Itamar just gave you a simple example that even pictures of dead children weren't allowed to be in the protest. So over the years, the government and the far right said a lot of sentences that turned out to be the only thing that Israelis are listening to, and it became common sense, even if they don't believe it inside. Like, all Palestinians want to kill all Jews. All Palestinians are animals. We have no partner. There is no one to talk to on the other side. So when you keep saying those stuff, when your people, like when the community hears nothing but those stuff, he will start believing them. And this is where standing together comes. We are trying to build a new majority inside of Israel that will help us shift the political will to achieve those stuff. Because who holds the narrative and power back home?
Right.
The government. And we need to win as many people as possible and build that power from the ground up in order to bring the power back to the people, to us. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Anything you'd like to add, Itamar?
Maybe you ask about numbers, of course.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, if you had to guess,
of course,
if
we
you
don't
had
have the
10
numbers.
friends or 10 random people, how many would you say would be not necessarily support your organization? They could have their own reason. I'm saying just the sentiment that you guys have.
Let me answer like that. And of course, it's not a full answer, but still. Even in surveys that were conducted after October 7, both in Palestinian society and in Israeli society, majority of the people, roughly 60%, say that they would support a two-state solution. And that's saying something, right? That's saying, I believe, that the majority of the people want to live in peace. The real problem is they don't believe it's possible to live in peace. For Jewish Israelis, October 7 is a case in point, that it's impossible. For Palestinians, the horrible war in Gaza for a year and a half now is a case in point. But most of the people all around the world, I presume, want to live in peace. And I think that those numbers also show that the majority of the people understand that no one is going anywhere. There are roughly 7 million Palestinians on the land and roughly 7 million Jews on the land, and no one is going nowhere. So I think that the majority in both societies do understand that. Our mission is to persuade them that it's also possible and that, the only solution, but also the best solution. And this is, I think, our challenge.
Okay. No, I really like that. Angela, I got one more question that's really targeting you again.
You're doing a lot of work. With
She's good at managing the microphone.
Activist. I'm an activist.
Natural on camera. So describe. Here's a big thing for me. And I grew up in the heartland. I grew up in, it's a conservative Christian America in general. And I grew up with people who I think I have a gauge for like what their understanding of the Middle East is. It's very limited. It's all, sadly, mostly Hollywood movies and terrible, mainstream media going back from the 90s and early 2000s before they even had the benefit of the internet possibly disrupting their ideas a little bit. What is life like for Christian Palestinians living either as Israeli citizens or the ones who aren't? Because I think a lot of times it's always the Muslim. I'm using the terminology that is in America. The Muslim, right? It's like the Muslim terrorist, jihadi kind of mentality of or characterization of the Palestinian people. And I think a lot of times, sadly, very sadly, because of those cognitive biases that we have as human beings, they can easily manipulate Christians into being like, oh yeah, they're different, they're other, they're not like us. They, all that difference kind of talk comes into their heads versus saying, wait a minute, I would say my unwavering support without any conditions towards Israel results in that being done to Christians like me, wait, what? And it completely shocks them. Can you explain a little bit, what is life like for being Palestinian Christian? What do you get impacted by? And is it that different than what a Muslim Palestinian gets impacted by?
I would say yes. I'm not proud to say it, but let's start with that for me, growing up, I always had to prove to people that there are Palestinians who are Christians. People don't seem to know that. Sure. And that's really funny because Jesus was a Jew Palestinian and he lived in Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem. Speaking of Jesus, I believe he's the one leading by example in my life. like with all the persecution, he knew that he wanted to do a change, and he always embraced his humanity while doing it, but never, ever compromising his truth. So he is, now let's go back to the topic. I'll tell you something. When I am in the streets and I'm talking to someone, I have a very fluent Hebrew. And like my accent sounds like a Jewish French sometimes.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like an Arabic English accent, like English Arabic, yeah.
So they come to me and they ask me, are you Jewish French? And I say no. And then they say and I say, like, it's very provocative back home to say you're Palestinian, especially to someone with a kippah on his head. So I say I'm an Arab. And the instant question, Muslim or Christian? Then I take a pause and I say Christian, and the answer is Baruch Hashem, which means thank God. And it always haunted me that this dehumanization of the Muslim community, and I also see it in the cinema and in Hollywood, and like now when you open your eyes to the world and start watching movies, and you say that in every single movie, if there is someone who is a terrorist, he must be Muslim. And if, like, I heard I watched a movie the other day, I forgot its name, and they thought that attack was by a terrorist. And then they discovered that it was by a mafia member. So he called the police and he said, no, it's not a terror attack. It's a mafia criminal. So unless it is not Muslim and it's not a terrorist,
right,
he is a criminal. He is a killer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have that dehumanization also in the Jewish society that looks at Muslims as terrorists. And also us Christians, that we feel like minority inside of minority in Israel. So we always feel like we have to preserve our religion. So back home, you will see Christians more committed to the religion and to Jesus, and they love to talk about it. So yeah, it does good with Jews. Like they feel they can trust me. But with Muslims, sometimes I feel like not all of them, but sometimes they feel threatened by my existence. And unless they hear me explicitly talk about my Palestinian identity, they won't trust me.
They're looking for kind of signals that they can trust you. Oh, okay, there, she's on our side, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so now I'm adding, like, I'm also Palestinian, also Israeli citizen, and also Christians. I have all traumas and all problems from everywhere, and I have to convince people every day that I'm on the right path.
You know what's funny, and I want to ask a follow-up. So I grew up in a unique kind of environment, and I think that in general, people who grew up as a super minority, like you're describing, within the community school system, wherever they were raised, I think it can be very traumatizing and difficult when you're little, but I think it can create some of the most incredible wisdom and perspective when you get older. When you grow up and you mature and you read and you study and you learn, and the more of that you had when you were younger, where you didn't feel like you just belonged to a certain team and you were in a certain bucket, I think it creates a lot of empathy, and it creates a lot of being able to like take yourself out of your shoes, put yourself in someone else's shoes, and truly see them in a way that maybe you couldn't if you were just in this nice, comfortable space as the majority, where it's, I don't have to, I take it for granted, I don't have to think about it. So
Beautifully said.
What do you think for Christian Palestinians, though, does the occupation still impact you?
Of course, we live
like
under the same
what are the things, policies, things that you see as a Palestinian Christian that you're like, this is happening to me still because I'm Palestinian?
I told you about all the political persecution. They weren't saying this is Muslim, this is Christian. They were saying he is an Arab. They didn't even use the word Palestinian. He's an Arab. He likes a post, or he does anything that sounds like terror sympathizers. So we were targeted all as a community. It wasn't just Muslims or Palestinians. And I don't feel that being Christian really helped me since October 7th to save myself. So maybe it's time to like let go and get rid of those stereotypes that Christians are treated better than Muslims. We're both Palestinians. Like I don't want to feel less Palestinian just because I'm Christian. And I want to know and tell people that we live under the same system of control, and we need to like come together because there are enough people out there who are trying to divide us. So yeah, It didn't protect me being Christian, but it did give me the empathy that you talked about, like that ability to hold more than one pain and more than one truth at once. I believe sometimes like it's the way I grew up as a Christian that helped me.
And there are like people, I've had family members in my family, my mom's side of the family is Christian. And I have an aunt who's really a devout Christian, practicing, beautiful practicing Christian in terms of how she professes and manifests her faith. She does all kinds of incredible acts in her community, takes care of homeless people, like just one of those beacon kind of members of the community. And she's been to several tours to Jerusalem and to the Holy Land. Do Christians, American Christians who love to go and say, I'm going to go visit the Holy Land, I'm going to go see everything, do they get to see the reality of how Palestinians or Christian Palestinians are living? Or are they shielded from that? Like, what is that? What are they actually able to see versus what is kind of like just a facade maybe that they don't get to see through?
Maybe, like, I will start small from the Palestinians inside Israel who don't get the chance to go to Bethlehem, for example. And you know, Bethlehem is really important for Palestinians. And also the old city in Jerusalem, Knesset Yami.
كل عام في سقف النور بيكون أسوأ من اللي قبله من حيث تعامل الشرطة الإسرائيلية هالسنة.
And
that's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, correct, in English, I believe?
I don't know what's
so
in
people who are
English.
listening, I believe it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
the church that Jesus like rose up on Easter. And I lost you. What was the question?
Just the difference between what maybe those the tourists that come from the United States that get sent over to Israel to go visit, Christian tourists.
So they
what
go
do
to
see?
Nazareth.
What don't they see?
They go to Nazareth. It's really safe there. But they don't get to reach the places where Palestinian-Christians are being spit on, are being under occupation. Beit Jala, Bethlehem, I spend most of my days there. Christians don't reach that area. But all of the holy places and practices are there, and you can talk to actually Palestinian Christians and learn from them about settler violence, for example.
غيرت وديع حركة يا شباب فيها غاز بسرعة بسرعة ابعد ابعدوا يا شباب فزع يا شباب.
So what they see when they come to the home is that everything is cool and beautiful and Nazareth is amazing, but they don't get to see the ugly side of the occupation. And even I, growing up, I didn't get to see it. The first time I saw it was when I moved to Jerusalem and I was disconnected from my family. I need to tell the listeners, I am reconnecting with my family, no worries. Like, I sent myself to therapy, my parents went to therapy, we're connecting because I cannot advocate for Palestine-Israel peace and not advocate for peace in my family, so don't worry about me, guys. Now, back to our story. I didn't see that things growing up, so how would someone who is Christian from abroad would come to Israel-Palestine and see those stuff?
Interesting. There's so many different paths I want to go down. So, okay, let me try to slow down.
May I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think it's important, and actually, I want people to know that there are things, there's kinds of discriminations that you can't see. You have to know about it. So even inside Israel, we spoke about it this morning. Since 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel, 0 Palestinian cities were built inside Israel. So this is discrimination, right? I mean, textbook discrimination and racism, but there's no way to see it, and there's no way to see 0 cities. In Palestinian cities and villages, the plans to how to expand the cities are not unauthorized. So almost each and every house that is built in those cities is illegal. So the state forcing everybody to become felons. There's no way to see it. You have to understand it. And I think this is something that we also have to understand. There's a lot of systemic injustice and systemic racism inside Israel, also around the world, also in the US, right? But we have to speak also about that. This is part of the fight that we are having. Those are part of the things that we are fighting in order to change. It's not just, and it's really important, don't get me wrong, it's not just the way that people talk to Palestinians. It's really about the changing everything from its roots, changing the whole system.
So a couple different things. So I know we have a bit of time limit here for you guys to be able to catch your plane and everything. I want you to get to the airport on time. So I want to go through things a little bit quicker for some of these questions, if you don't mind. But one thing that you mentioned earlier about the whole terrorist thing and demonization of Muslims that I've said in a previous episode is, I think, and this is maybe a little unorthodox theory, but you know the use of the N-word in American society towards African Americans. Me and my brothers have this kind of, I have 3 brothers and we have this, and a sister, and we have this, this kind of running theory that the T word, the terrorist word, is actually in many ways worse than the N-word. Because, and stay with me for a minute, for those of you who are like freaking out, losing, like, yeah, sorry, he lost me. The N-word, when you hear like a racist person, the most stereotypical person say the N-word, it demonizes, it makes people seem like, okay, that person's less than me, they're less educated, they're less socioeconomically, they mean less, whatever it is that's associated with that word, or even worse. But the T word almost designates automatic ability to be killed with no due process and no questioning whatsoever. That's what it's taken on the meaning of in America. Like terrorist, drone strike, wipe out the entire family, no one's gonna ask a question. And if you look at Gaza, what's happening now, one of the things that comes up is this, we had a conversation with another guy who brought me this book about Real Bad Arabs. It's about demonization of Arabs in media and stuff over the last 100 years almost. And it was about, okay, we're gonna kill 100 people to take out this one Hamas ranking member. We don't know, the high level, low level, mid level, doesn't matter practically. So you take out 100 people, take out 50 people in a marketplace, take out an apartment complex, whatever. They paint it as if, you guys remember this show? It came out in the like post 9/11 period. It's called 24. It has like Kfar Sutherland, and it's always the whole episode is 24 hours and the time is ticking and they're trying to catch a terrorist before he blows up a nuke in the middle of New York City, these kind of scenarios. They've trained the average American or the American psyche to believe that every time you use the word terrorist, then it means like you saw in the TV show 24, meaning they have a button, they're about to push it, there's a nuke in the middle of Times Square, and that terrorist, if we don't go torture 5 people, so you don't have to worry about due process, if we don't wipe out an entire family because we have a moral dilemma, but hey, we can save 50 million people off of nuclear war, or we can take 5 people and kill them, it's fine. This kind of demonization is so dangerous, and it's active in Gaza. It's active in the killing ratios that we hear people fighting about on the news between Netanyahu and his press, people versus Piers Morgan and other famous people online who keep on bringing these people on. What is your view of that demonization, the terrorist word, and how dangerous it is in terms of getting us to a better place, moving us towards peace? Does that word need to be re-scripted or rethought and defined?
I never thought about it this way. I mean, specifically about the war. So sometimes it's hard to, just immediately answer thinking on a feet. But yeah, for sure, absolutely. The Israeli government and people around the world use this word as an excuse to do horrible things. I mean, to take down, even saying take down, okay, but it's how to say it in English, right? To take down 100 people in order to kill one man, it's a horrible crime. And I absolutely agree that they're using this word, terrorist or a ticking bomb, in order to just give themselves a pass. We had to do it because, so yeah, I think, of course, language is a tool. We have to understand that. Right. And we have to unpack the way that people are using words in order to justify their horrible deeds. So with that, I absolutely agree, of course.
Maybe I'll just add real quick that the Israeli community is also protected by the way the media gives, because I'm Palestinian Israeli citizen, I'm really exposed to Palestinian media, really exposed to the Israeli media, and I see the way they say it. Like in the Israeli media, it's less, 300 terrorists were killed. But it's not 300 terrorists. Like, I have my social media, I can see the innocent people and children being burned and being killed.
So it's everyone, every 300, regardless of if they're civilians, they're all terrorists. So this is what the Israeli community gets, that word, terrorists. That's my point. That word just automatically almost just gives everything a pass.
Yeah, it's it's legit. And we don't need to feel, we don't need to empathize, we don't need to know what's going on in Gaza, because terrorists are being killed. There are no innocent people in
and
Gaza.
who cares about terrorists?
Yeah, who
the
cares
word
about
is so
them?
dangerous.
It's very dangerous. I agree. I agree.
I want to get, we talked about the T word and this kind of thing. I want to hit something on its head and get your guys' perspectives. So what do you believe happened on October 7th? We have three narratives from what I can see in the US. One is the mainstream media and US government kind of view, which in the very beginning, I was traveling with my boss at work. At the time, I was in DC doing some conference. And when October 7th happened, I woke up in the morning and everything. And it was the 40 beheaded babies language. It was and they used this language of ISIS, like as if 40 babies were lined up and they took a sword. Somehow they have a sword and they cut each one's head off one by one. Like these images that the Western mind, I think, has been programmed to think about and associate automatically. That was the mainstream view. Now, obviously, later on, the White House had to redact the statement. The president was repeating these statements that were not substantiated, were not true. So this is like the mainstream view that's now been adjusted, let's say, to say, okay, 40 beheaded babies, not true, exaggeration. This was an exaggeration. But there was a lot of killing and there was a lot of death on October 7th on the Israeli side by Hamas and all this stuff. The other argument that you see is the Max Blumenthal. I don't know if you know Max Blumenthal, this view. So he's like an online personality. He's on X, big on X, Twitter, Jewish American who's big on like media and journalism stuff and calling all these like conspiracy theories around the issue. So what their view is October 7th was widely exaggerated. Barely anyone died. The Hannibal Directive kind of talk that this was the Israelis killed themselves in this attack in response. And then I think you have something else. This is like maybe usually the truth lies somewhere in between these all these different extremes that when you hear things being laid out this way. From your guys' perspective, what actually happened on October 7th in your opinion, from what you've been able to see?
I'm sorry, why is it so hard to say that October 7 was a horrible crime, was a massacre, was a war, was a crime against humanity and a war crime?
There are emotions here. It's so sad, so somber, so silent.
זה אופק. אופק זה החבר הכי טוב שלי. זה מיני. ובדיוק כשאני נכנסת, בתמונה הראשונה שאני רואה. שבר אותי.
Thank God those 40 babies weren't beheaded. Thank God it didn't happen. Thank God it didn't happen. It's not very hard to say it was a massacre, it was a crime. Just like it's not very hard and it should be easy and it should be said that what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza right now are war crimes and crimes against humanity.
احكي احكي للعالم احكي للعالم احكي انت اللي تحكي الصورة بتعبر
حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل
خليه يحكي امسك احكي ضلك احكي ضلك احكي يا ريتني صاحب واستمر واقول يا ريتني صاحب واكمل عنك يا ريتني صاحبي واكمل عنك كمان اكمل والله بكمل عنك مستعد اصير صاحبي.
All those I would say it like that. Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, of course, it's very triggering as Jewish and Israeli, of course. The feeling, we traveled in Canada and we came to the US and sometimes we traveled to Europe. The feeling is that people around the world treat our life as if it's a soccer game, okay? They cheer for one group and hence they hate the other group and they looking or inventing all those kinds of conspiracy theories. And you know what? Fuck all those people who are trying to create those conspiracy theories or even using the horrible reality right now in Israel, Palestine, of course, much more in Gaza. I don't want anyone to understand me wrong, but they're using it just in order to, I don't know, advance themselves or entertainment. Yeah. We want people to pick a side. It's extremely important that people would pick a side and pressure their governments to pick a side. But we want people to understand what the sides really are. The sides are not all Israelis with the far-right fascist government of Hamas, of Benjamin Netanyahu, against all Palestinians with Hamas. Those are not the sides. The real sides are warmongers on one side, the Israeli government.
לנו יש משימה, אני מסיימת. והדבר האחרון שניתן לכם הוא שעופר כסיף יעלה להר הבית עם דגל פלסטין. אני אישית גאה בהריסות של עזה, ושכל תינוק, גם עוד 80 שנה מהיום, יספר לנכדיו מה עשו היהודים שרצחו להם משפחות, אנסו אותם וחטפו להם אזרחים. אתה והחברים שלך יכולים לחלום שנאפשר לכם לבנות ממשלה.
אתה תמות, הילדים שלך ימותו, הנכדים שלך ימותו, לא יהיה מדינה פלסטינית, לא יהיה.
אין עם פלסטיני, אין עם כזה. ומהסיבה הזו, הרוב הגדול, כל בן תרבות בעולם, יודע שהארץ הזאת היא שלנו, של עם ישראל, ושלנו בלבד.
And also Hamas, who are not working together, but they are feeding for one another. Benjamin Netanyahu said many times that Hamas is an asset. We know they had some connections before. We know that Benjamin Netanyahu sent money to Hamas. They are on one side. And the other side is the side of the people in Gaza, people in the West Bank, people inside Israel, that they don't live equally. Again, I don't want anybody to understand me incorrect, but we share the same interest, the interest of a just peace. Those are the sides. And so I think for me, for us as a movement, this is what we have to speak about. This is what we have to speak about. And it shouldn't be hard to speak truthfully, very truthfully about October 7, and it shouldn't be hard to speak very truthfully about what's going on now in Gaza. It's not hard to vehemently oppose what happened on October 7 and do exactly the same about what's going on in Gaza.
Sorry about the mics.
It's okay.
That's fine.
It's okay.
We're sharing the land.
Next interview, we'll have both. Don't worry, we'll have two mics.
I think people find it hard to acknowledge someone else's pain or someone else's reality or truth just because they feel like it's gonna diminish or dilute their own pain. But horrible things happened on October 7th. Innocent people were killed. Me, a Palestinian citizen of Israel, like I could have easily been in the Nova party, and I could have easily been killed, and my parents would lose their children. And it's not hard. It was horrible. It was horrific. Innocent people were killed. It doesn't mean, when I say that, doesn't mean that innocent people weren't killed in Palestine all across all years. Mm-hmm. This can be true, and this also, like, I don't get it, people. Yeah. And stop, like, people, please stop with the conspiracy. We are living in the land, and we are in the fire. We have skin in the game. It's not for your own entertainment. And thank you. I'm kind again and nice.
One thing I want to say about what you just said. So you said, what was the last thing you just said? You said that the people that died, what does it do? What does it tarnish or diminish from anything if those people actually, if you admit that those people died or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that has happened with this whole issue is, and I blame the media for most of it, the government and the media on our side and probably your side in Israel as well. I'm trying to find good words to put this together. So essentially,
it's never easy.
It's never easy. Essentially, the double standard of, okay, let me put it simply in a scenario. If an Israeli dies or is killed, all the cameras of the world descend upon that spectacle. Mm-hmm. And if a Palestinian in Gaza or West Bank or something about a border crossing incident gets killed, like sniper shoots them or something, only those who are like in our circles of like knowing the region and the issues and go onto certain websites that have like daily, updates from the West Bank, daily, find out, right? And we're all like people, I would say, of your mind and my mind would be united in saying this is awful and this is awful. This shouldn't happen. This shouldn't happen. But the reaction people have is like the mainstream media jumps in only on one side or mostly on one side, but not on the other. And I feel like people are more reacting to that phenomenon than they are to the actual people that died. Yeah. It's not that people are so much like, oh, I don't care. In their heart of hearts, if you met someone, you're like, yeah, I don't want anyone's kids to die. I don't want any innocent person who has nothing to do with this, the war, anything to die. I don't want. But it's almost like they're so sick of the double standard in our Western media that has years of propaganda against Muslims, against Arabs, against other brown people, black people, you name it, to all of a sudden it's like, oh, that suffering matters. But then where were you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, before Thursday, when all this other stuff was going on? So I feel like that's a lot of it. And if we're going to get somewhere more positive, we've got to start waking people up to that.
Yeah.
Like get people aware that this is a phenomenon. You're being manipulated.
I agree.
But don't let that manipulation take away your humanity.
I agree.
Right?
Everything we're listening, like, since October 7th is like, what about October 7th? What about October 7th? And as a Palestinian, I never said the word, what about October 6th? What about October 5th? Like, I gave space to October 7th, but yeah, at some point, I gotta be real honest. Like, if I wanna talk about the pain in Gaza right now, if I wanna talk about the children in Gaza, if I wanna talk about my people now being wiped out in Gaza, I don't need to address it all. Like, I don't need to talk about the hostages also. I don't need to talk about October 7th in the same sentence. Like, people must stop asking others to prove their humanity. And if I'm talking about everything that's going on in Gaza, doesn't mean I'm denying October 7th. Like, everything is horrible. We're just human beings dealing with other human beings. And that's the point. But you got a point with what you say. And it comes from empathy, like to understand where the person is coming from and why he's so sick of it. But I believe inside of every person, if he engages in a really deep conversation until the end, we will find out that most of us, human beings, like, can easily at the end acknowledge pain of all people, because we need that feeling that our pain is also acknowledged. So once we get our pain acknowledged, we can easily acknowledge other people's pain.
And I want to bring an example for the sake of time. I want to keep moving on. I'm going to play the videos. I'll put them in the post-production for the sake of time. But I woke up yesterday or the day before, I got a video of this Palestinian father who's holding his son, who was killed in Gaza. And the father, I started crying. I woke up, I rolled over, like a lot of people, checked my phone, and I saw the video, and I was literally weeping by myself. And he was talking to his son saying, just do you want to go to the Dukkan and buy the cookies? Aren't you going to go to tell me, give me a hard time about going to the Dukkan and buying the cookies. And he was talking to his dead son, just like, almost like thinking that he could will him into coming back to life and responding to him. And I lost it. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it right now. And we have these two extremes, okay? And I'm going to play the video.
والله لا اشتري لك اللي بدك اياه. اكلت الشيبس اللي شريت لك اياه. امان طب رد علي وشوشني. كش اتكلم طب وشوشني. خلاص كش ترد علي. طب انا زعلتك في شيء؟ انا زعلتك يا عبود رد علي مالك. امان رد علي. طب رد علي بس كلمة واحدة بس. بحياة الله بس كلمة واحدة. طب وشوشني نتفاهم. طب هاي شكل والله هاي وجبت لك اياه معي. مش قلت لي اشتري لي وتعال شريت لك. والله جبت لك شيبس وحياة الله ما تسيبني. والله ما احنا قادرين تعبنا خلص. وحياة النبي تعبنا ارحمونا. طيب يا عبود. مش قلت لي بدك تشتري لي والله شريت لك شيبس وحلويات. طب رد علي بحياة ربك. بحياة ربك رد علي.
And you can see it in post-production, and then now we're talking back. So it just breaks apart anyone who has kids, and especially if you have kids, you can even more relate to it. But on one extreme, you have this sense, like people get emotional and they think, these are real people, to your point, with real pain, with people, real family dying. They're never going to talk again. They're never going to smile again. People are dying. It's not numbers, it's people. And on the other side, you have an extreme sentiment of like, hey, got to do what needs to be done. And I think on the Israeli side, on the militarist kind of side, you probably have that like, hey, our boys are going to go to war. We're going to go in there. We're going to fight. Hey, we'll go clean them out. Hey, we're going to lose some people. Let's go kill. Let's go fight. We're doing this for our freedom. We're doing this for our this. All that kind of babble about war and securing our country and security and whatever else. On the Palestinian side, there's a famous video which I'll play now as well in post-production, so we'll go to that.
قل إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون اللهم أجرني في مصيبتي واخلفني من خير منها سامحوا ابن عمه سامحوا مالكم يا عم شدوا حيلكم أرض جهاد هذه وأرض رباط كنا في سبيل الله احنا ليش عايشين بكره بياخدك من ايده وبخششك في الدرس الاعلى الشهيد بتشفع على 70 واحد من اهل بيته.
This video that was just played, it shows at the very beginning of the Gaza war, there was a guy going through a morgue in Gaza, and this guy was crying about his cousin died or something. And he was saying, stop crying. Why are you crying? Be proud. Your cousin, he died a martyr. This is the land of martyrdom. This is the land of shuhada. This is the land of this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you better than that and multiple more. God will this. God will reward you. God, he's going to compensate you. And then I want to go to another shot that I'm going to share of a mother recently in Gaza. She lost her only child, and he used to take care of her. She has all kinds of problems with her hands in terms of, I think it's rheumatoid arthritis, extreme arthritis and stuff. Can't do anything on her own. He was her primary caretaker. And she's crying, just talking about her son. And again, the people are comforting her and everything.
ابنك مات موتة رب ولا شهيد؟ طب نيالك. ايه؟ الله يرحمه. الوحيد يعني؟ يا بي ربنا ايش بحبك عشان هيك اخذه. كان مسلم في كل حاجة. كان يساعدك في كل حاجة؟ كل شيء والله عشان يخبر. طب والحين؟ والله منكم الثاني سالفة شايفين؟ ايش اسمه كان؟ ايش اسمه؟ حمزة. وهي الله بعثك اثنين. ايش كان يساعدك هو؟ كل شيء. وهي اجاك تساعدك صح؟ كلنا اولادك يا حجي الله يرحمه. اللي ربنا حبه كثير اخذه في الحرب. غمضتين واهلي كلهم نيالك عند ربك. يعني ضليت انت لقيت لحالك؟ انا واخويا وبس.
I want to talk about 2 points why I bring these up. One is to show people what's really going on. They just saw the videos. I don't think most people see that on any mainstream media. One, these are the two extremes. We have two paths. We have the path of, I'll keep sacrificing. We'll keep dying for the cause. I'm sure there are people on the Israeli side, same mentality. We'll keep doing it until we get the job done. Okay? And then you have other people that are thinking, we're humans. Can we save life? Can we preserve life? Can we find a path that doesn't result in all that death and destruction? I want to talk about both of your thoughts on that, and also the overall point of this idea that the Palestinians don't want life. They don't like life. I've heard this in the American media. They're a death cult. They glorify death, because they hear these people like these videos. The martyr. Oh, he's a martyr. It's great. It's an honor to be a martyr. Give some context to what that really means to Palestinians. I look at it when I see those videos, and as a Muslim, I get the mentality. It's maybe more like for a Western audience, like the medieval times of Joan of Arc, who died a martyr. We don't even use the word martyr in American culture much anymore at all. Mm-hmm. But for older cultures and more, traditional societies, they do. And it basically means they gave themselves up for the things that are the most important: their family, their country, their religion, whatever, defending their honor, whatever. But the goal is not to die. To keep dying. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to people that some of these themes of death and accepting death at any loss as being completely fine, and overall it's a sacrifice, and hey, we're going to keep doing it, versus we can comfort people, and we can say that people who died, if they were doing what they were supposed to and were fighting for their families and whatever, they're hopefully in a good place, etc., is different than saying we're going to keep on increasing the numbers of dead on both sides.
Mahmoud Darwish said, على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. On this land is something worth living for. And there's also a very famous poem saying that we teach life, sir, we Palestinians. So our culture and our art and literature, it was never about dying. It was about living, about how much we Palestinians love life and love to live and want to live. Now, but the notion of that we Palestinians are dying shuhada. I thought about it before. I won't lie, I'll be so honest. And I feel like part of it is because they were so used to death and killing that it stopped meaning something for them. And I will also criticize my own people for, like, a huge number of Palestinians give more Ime, what is Ime? Worth,
Value.
Give more value to the land than to the lives of Palestinians. So they are willing to do anything just to keep the land, but not to keep their lives. And they say like fida. And I will also criticize one more sentence because I cannot, like I've been here for 2 weeks, I've been criticizing the Jewish community forever. My own community has a lot to be criticized for. Like that sentence, that chant, بالروح بالدم نفديك يا أقصى. In blood and in spirit, we will sacrifice ourselves for you, Aqsa. Now, I'm Christian. Maybe I'm not in a place to talk about it, but I don't believe that any mother would want her daughter or son to die for the sake of Al-Aqsa. Religion was made for us to live, not for us to die for it. So I believe it's time to treasure life more than death. And that gave people around the world the notion that Palestinians really do cherish death more than life. And that's another dehumanization of us. Like, okay, they want to die. So
yeah, you hear this, like Douglas Murray, he's a very common kind of propagandist for like the status quo Israeli right wing. And he comes on Joe Rogan recently with Dave Smith, and there were some other comedians, that podcast he was on. And he said, they're a death cult. Like the Palestinian side, he was referring to Hamas, but I think in general he means the Muslim Palestinians. They're a death cult. Why? Because they prefer death over life. And it's like, you have to know the culture and the religion and the rhetoric that comes out of these people who are in a very desperate situation, and then they'll say something like that to find some sort of strength to be able to go on, versus saying people actually like, I have a choice. I can either live in peace and harmony with my neighbors and have my kids be healthy and grow old, or I can just kill myself running towards a checkpoint or, whatever it might be. No one's going to choose, I would rather die.
Yeah.
People are going to choose life.
No one.
Whether they're Palestinian or Israeli or Christian or Muslim or Palestinian, it doesn't matter. That's just my opinion. I mean, that's my take on it.
And all those people saying that are people who never read the Quran, never read in Arabic. Once you get to know the language and the literature and everything about a people, you will realize a lot of things that you can't see it without learning that. And people don't learn that.
More than that, let's talk about the people who choose every day, Palestinians and Jews, to fight for the good life even in Israel and Palestine. Let's talk about the fact that in Standing Together and many other organizations in the occupied West Bank, also even in Gaza and inside Israel, there are people who are fighting in order to secure everybody's lives. And again, freedom and justice. I think that's much more important to talk about. We always hear about death, and death is constant in our life, and it's not by mistake, right? People are inflicting death. Can you say it?
Yeah.
Inflicting death? Okay,
yeah.
Good for me. But let's talk about the fight for life, for everybody. I think that's much more important. And it's even, especially after a year and a half of a war and decades of conflict and oppression, right? Let's talk about how we end it, not just about how people in the media in the West see it. I mean, it's important, but we want to move people. We don't just want to, educate people, give them more context. We want to move them into a right cause. It's much more important.
And so I think moving in that direction towards the end here, what I want to bring us to more about is we talked about so much. I think we focused a lot on like where we're currently at, what the problems are, et cetera. Let's talk about the solution and moving us in that direction. What do you think has to happen in order for us to, I would say, when I say us, I mean like people who are more moderate, who aren't as extreme in viewpoints maybe, and more mental and less emotional and able to think clearly a bit and calm themselves down. How do you get more of those people to be the dominant voice, and how do you alienate the fringe, the extremes on both sides? So not to justify one or the other, I'm saying you have extreme voices on both sides that would like to just keep things going as they are, or keep killing the other side, or keep whatever. What do you think the solution is to kind of quiet those voices and strengthen the voices in a different direction?
Okay, so we get that question quite a lot. We don't really know how to answer it for the American context, because things are different here. But we can say some things about what is it we're trying to do back home on the land in order to do exactly that, right? To build a new majority of many people together in communities that are working toward the same goal. So one thing that we learned is that people are sick and tired of just doing a dialogue. And I think it's also happening in the US. We hear it quite a lot. But again, a dialogue, and this community don't want to talk with that community or even inside the community. And you know what? I get it. People are dying right now. Children are dying right now. Dialogue has to lead to something.
Action.
Yeah,
Something
it had to lead to
actionable.
action. So this is the first lesson for us, at least on back home. We engage in a dialogue because dialogue is extremely important. People, Jewish people, need to hear Angela's story and many other Palestinians' story. We need to learn the other narrative. We need to acknowledge what happened in 48, in 67, and even before. But also, we have to think, what is it that we are going to do together? And this is what we're saying to people back home. You are very invited. You are going to hear some hard truths. You're going to get your opportunity to speak whatever you want and to ask all the questions that you want to ask. But you should know that we are going to ask you what is it that you want to do with us, because we want to change things, not just, understand them better or talk about them. And the second thing is, we also tell people, we're going to invite you to do something with us, and know that you don't have to agree on anything in order to do that. We are going to look for the one thing, minimum, that we all agree upon, and then we'll try to act on that. Because we will never agree about everything, and it's useless. We don't need to agree about everything. There are so many things that we can agree upon right now and are even urgent. So this is what we are trying to do back home. I believe it can work also for communities here in the States and in other places. I don't know if it's helpful.
I think people here follow the
things.
lead there. So I think, because until you get people coming from Israel and coming from Palestine who have a different message, that counters the traditional status quo.
So maybe even let me add something.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to do something together and you're not so sure what is it that you need to do, this is our suggestion. Okay, we talked before about picking sides and the side of the people, right? We need Americans to demand their political leaders. I know it sounds ridiculous with Trump in the White House, also to me, but you know what? It's still important to demand the American administration or politicians to pick a fight with the Israeli government right now. And when I'm talking about picking a fight, it's not just saying, oh, that's not okay and that's not okay. It's first and foremost, demand them to open the border for humanitarian aid. I don't know when it's going to be aired, but right now the border is closed. There's a horrible, horrible man-made humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And even Trump said something about that. So there's opening here. First and foremost, we have to get humanitarian aid inside. And then the American government or governments around the world should pick a fight with the Israeli government. Stop selling offensive arms to the Israeli government because they use it right now to destroy Gaza in my name. And I reject it and many Israelis reject it. Not all of us, of course. Again, don't get me wrong, but many of us reject it completely. We need governments around the world to sanction the Israeli government. I mean, the International Court said that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal and people should acknowledge that. And while the American politicians or leaders doing all that, we also need them to speak directly also to the Israeli public. Israelis care a lot about what is it that people around the world say about them, like every other nation, I suppose. And if your communities will do all the things that we said just now, of course, people in Israel, in the government, would call that anti-Semitism because they're weaponizing anti-Semitism. But criticizing the Israeli policies and the Israeli government is not anti-Semitism at all. We reject this notion as well. There is anti-Semitism in the world. This is not anti-Semitism. We need the politicians around the world to speak with the Israeli society and tell us, we're doing what we're doing. We're picking a fight with your government, a real genuine fight with your government, because we want to save lives on Gaza, because the things that are going on back there are horrible. We want to save lives in the West Bank because it's also horrible there. But we are also doing it out of solidarity with you, because we know that the only way that also you get to live in safety and everything is if all that would end and you'll achieve peace. And your government is not doing that, and this is why we are picking a fight with your government. So if you want to come around something together and do it together, this is our recommendation at least. Do you want to add something maybe?
For the sake of time, I do want to ask, I have a couple more questions real fast. We have like 5 minutes. So I think that right now where we're at in the United States is I've never seen a point in history growing up in this country where there's been more support for Palestinian self-determination, liberation, whatever you want to call it, and for something to change in terms of like support for Israel being like a blank check towards Israel. It's changing. I think the podcasting and the social media scene has helped that a lot. What we're seeing now, though, is attacks on the First Amendment, people who are being arrested because they are pro-Palestinian voices that are clearly not, they're like the best citizens you could want to be pro-Palestinian, meaning like this recently, Mohsen Mahdawi, he philosophy major at Columbia, master's degree. He builds bridges with Jewish and Israeli people in the community, in the campus. Like, I mean, he's the best guy to be the poster child of that kind of a movement. And they tried to arrest him, and thankfully he was released, but they tried to, basically crush him. We have the BDS thing, battles in multiple states, Texas famous for trying to crush the BDS movement, make it illegal for companies to get government funding if they have any BDS involvement. You have anti-Semitism laws that you explained. It's being exaggerated to say that if you're critical of Israel, it means you hate Jewish people. Keffiyeh legislation, someone tried to introduce, I don't know if it ever went through, saying that if you wear the keffiyeh, it's like not allowed in certain workplaces or things like that. To me, it's a sign of desperation. It means that something is changing and they want to control and stop the positive change. From your guys' perspective, what do you think of the current climate change that you've seen across the world in regard to this issue, public sentiment around this issue? And do you think that it's creating desperation in the Israeli right, where they're going to try to do to the West Bank essentially what they were able to now get done with for 2 years without being stopped in Gaza? That's my concern. So the public tide is changing, but is that going to create desperation from the extreme side that says we have to accelerate quickly because in 20 years, 15 years, the American public is going to vote in a different way possibly. We need to do something now, and the West Bank is going to be kind of like accelerated in terms of bad things happening.
Like the fact that there are a lot of anti-democratic laws being passed right now in Israel means that they are desperate. But to be honest, I've never seen it from the point of view that you just like I need to reflect on that. Like it came to me on the spot. Also here in the USA and also back home, students are being silenced. Like I told you, like I've been through a lot, and
maybe
I have a blackout.
It's okay.
I'm exhausted.
You guys are tired.
Also sick. Just the question itself, like I don't think that I'm someone with answers. Like I don't think anyone has answers. Like how the right wing right now see those.
Like, do they get nervous? Are they nervous in your opinion? Do you think that the people on the right in Israel who want this stuff to continue and to take all the land and are okay with settler violence and settlements, expansion, etc.? Do you think that the American public shift in opinion is really making them nervous? Do you think are they scared of losing that backing?
What really makes them nervous? I mean, we're not sitting with them around the table, and so we never got to ask them that. But first of all, it should be said that you're talking, and it's perfectly understandable, you're talking from American context.
Yeah.
But what we hear is that the American president, Donald Trump, is suggesting to transfer Palestinians from Gaza.
Right.
So seems to me that regarding the U.S., the Israeli government is having a party right now. It's terrible. And we have to bring him down and take them down as well. But they are nervous. I mean, maybe also about stuff in the U.S. We don't know. What we do know is that they are nervous about things that are happening in our society. I don't know how many people know. I don't know if the people in the American media are talking about that. But there's a tsunami right now of refusal letters. People who refuse to go back to the war, reserve soldiers who refuse to go back to the war. We are talking about thousands of people right now. This makes them nervous. because the head of the Israeli army said, I think it was a week and a half ago, something like that, it was published in the news in Israel. He told the government, I don't have enough men to do what you want me to do in Gaza. Now, for them, of course, it's horrible because they want to destroy Gaza. But for everybody else, that's good news. So they are very nervous about things that are going on in Israel. And they are very, very, very nervous about the fight for a just peace inside Israel and also for equality and democracy. And they are very, very nervous when they see Palestinians and Jewish people fighting together. That's for sure, we can tell you. About the other stuff,
strategy,
I don't know. We'll go back home and we'll ask them, yeah.
Last question to kind of tie it up. In each of your opinions, can Israelis and Palestinians one day live side by side in peace? That's a typical question you get in America, I think, on many major news networks. And then if people can take one thing away from this, what would you want them to have as a takeaway?
Wow. Regarding the first question, the answer is absolutely yes. I'm working in Standing Together as well. So I get to go each and every day when I'm not here in Chicago, to the office. And in the office, there are Palestinians and Jews. They're talking Hebrew and Arabic. Everything, all the words are in Hebrew and Arabic. And people are talking together and working together and crying and joking and thinking about what is it that we need to do right now in order to achieve the same vision. We believe in the same vision. So for me, the answer is, of course, yes, because I get to live it each and every day. The real question is, would we be able to expand this out of the office of Standing Together into the streets and to the land? And that's not a yes or no question. That's a how question. That depends on how we're going to do that. And I believe that, unfortunately, it's going to take time, but I believe it's absolutely possible. And I'm an optimist, so I believe we'll achieve that. I also believe that we'll achieve it faster than many people think. But we have to work very, very hard to do that, and this is what we're trying to do.
And quickly, work quickly together. Time is of the essence.
My take on that is that people, they see Jewish and Palestinians fighting side by side in the occupation to obtain peace as something impossible. But here I am. I'm sitting next to Itamar, a Jewish Israeli, and I'm Palestinian, and we are doing the impossible. So peace is actually very, very, very possible. And it is an action. It's not a theory. I won't sit down at home and wait for peace to happen by itself. I need to go on the streets. I need to take action in order to make that possible. And we're not talking about a distant future. The future is here. It's already here. We cannot afford to wait any longer to obtain peace. We need it, a just one. And we need to take action. And we are the people we've been waiting for. That's it. It's us. We are going to be the people who are going to give you that peace. Thank you, Omar.
Itamar and Angela, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you both. It's been absolutely refreshing, completely different perspectives, I think, for a lot of people. I really look forward to collaborating with you afterwards to get some information, any links, anything that we can include in the description to kind of point people towards resources, information, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Shout out to Zach.
He was kind of the fill-in producer for this episode, working a few of the quality controls over there. Thank you guys so much. I wish you safe travels back home. Are you guys headed home? That's it? You're done? Your tour's over? 2 weeks are over? Okay. Safe travels, and hopefully we get to see each other again in the future, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you so
very much. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Very nice.